for joining me today, Sabine. It's lovely to see you again. We haven't seen each other for a long time.
Yeah, I think about a year.
Yes, it must be.
Year has passed so quickly.
It has, yes, it has. And bring us up to date with what you're doing now, what you've done. How has your journey been with your
Gosh.
work?
Okay. I have made a lot of new connections, especially via Instagram with other widow coaches. Um, I am doing. I have been invited to do a presentation in December about how to prepare bereaved partners for Christmas. So nutrition wise, what just giving them simple tips of simple changes to their breakfast routine or any other routine, or when they're staying with family or friends, what they can do, how they can prepare themselves for that.
Mm.
I have quite a lot of experience with that, having been away myself and staying with friends for 2 months. So
Yeah.
that has been a big disruption to my routine, and I'm glad to be back in the UK. I've also hooked up with a coach in Toronto. I've been asked to do a podcast with another widow coach in Louisiana.
Wow.
Done a podcast with Karen Sutton, the widow coach, about nutrition and the importance of good nutrition and bereavement. So, I don't know. I must have forgotten things, but yeah, my website is still not finished. it,
Is a website ever finished?
No, it isn't, but it's not even live. So if anybody wants to, look me up on my website, it's not there yet. So you have to
That's
go on
okay.
Instagram, on Facebook, to find out what I'm doing. Yeah, so
And the website is coming.
it is, yes. The first pages are there, but they're not live yet. So
That's
yeah,
okay. They're on their way.
yes.
Fantastic. And at least people can connect with you, with Facebook and Instagram. So it's not like you're you're going to appear today and can never be found again.
Oh yeah. I forgot. I'm also an ambassador and affiliate of Atalos now, which is a UK bereavement organisation. They try to um, get as much information for bereaved people as possible on their website. So that's another. I've been asked to become a regular blog writer for them. So
Wow.
I just started writing my first blog, and the next ones are in the pipeline. So
That's brilliant. And Carolyn is watching with us and said that she's in the same position with the website. So
okay, thank you, Caroline.
so I think it's a common thing. And
Yes, it
we
is.
stress about it and we don't need to.
Yeah, and I've noticed, if I had written and finished my website 2 years ago, it would already be out of date, because in the meantime I've evolved and I've developed and grown so much. I would have to rewrite it anyway, so it's
Yeah.
better that it's not been done yet. So
I don't know though, because it's always going to need to be updated.
it will be, but even the basis, the foundation was, I wasn't there yet mentally.
Mm.
So
That's,
everything's, yeah.
yeah, I can understand that. And
Yeah.
and but you still incorporate Ayurveda?
Oh yeah. I just won a scholarship for um, 2 years of further Ayurvedic studies with a Ayurvedic school in Florida. So
That's very
that's
exciting.
that's very exciting. Yes, yeah. Instead of only 50%, I've been given a scholarship for 75%, which is,
Wow.
I'm paying peanuts for top quality Ayurvedic training. So
And
yeah.
do you go to Florida for that? Or?
No, I don't have to. Luckily, I don't. No, it's all online. It's yeah. I've already done spiritual health and healing was the first module I did, which was very enlightening. Caused me to do a lot of additional reflective work. So I think I'm still being guided, to wherever I need to be in my own healing journey.
Yeah. And I know today we're going to talk about the anxiety of not eating. Well, what comes first? Does the anxiety come and then the eating isn't right? So it creates a rolling effect with the anxiety, or is it the eating causing anxiety and different mental health issues? Which way round is it, or is it both ways, or you know?
It can be both ways. So you can. Um, hmm, it depends really on why you're eating. The food you're eating. So if it's an emotional reason that you're eating certain foods, like you have sugar cravings, then of course that comes from more the mental side of things, and that causes physical issues that can contribute or exacerbate anxiety. But you can also have stress that leads to anxiety, digestive issues, and then, causing a vicious circle like that, or both. So diet and stress.
Right.
So it's a complex picture, but what most people overlook in anxiety is the physical component of the side of things.
Right. So how does somebody recognize that?
Well, you could actually ask yourself what you're eating. Is there anything that's, for example, irritating, which can cause anxiety in your digestive system? So, irritants would be like coffee, but also tomatoes, and a lot of people eat tomatoes regularly. Um, and because one third of our nervous system is in the gut, that gets communicated back to the brain. So if anything is irritating the gut, that is communicated. So that's the gut-brain axis that people ignore.
Mm.
So the brain and the gut are constantly communicating and talking to each other. So, and then also digestive issues. If you have any gas and bloating, gas can also be irritating. So that's
Mm.
communicated to the brain and can cause anxiety. That's just two ways. And then, of course, when we are stressed, that can cause imbalances in our gut microbiome. So the balance between the good and the bad guys.
Mm.
And that can cause sugar cravings and neurotransmitter imbalances like serotonin deficiency, dopamine deficiency, all sorts of deficiencies, and that can trigger cravings like coffee addiction, for example. So, and that, of course, as I mentioned, is an irritant. So you can get into vicious cycles in a variety of ways.
Right. Right. And so are the same food, drinks, an irritant and likely to cause anxiety and stress, um, the same for everyone? Like you said, tomatoes. Would tomatoes affect everyone?
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
tomatoes are high histamine, and histamine is a molecule that travels really fast throughout the body, and tomatoes have an instant histamine release. So
Right.
within seconds, you have a response in the whole body. So
Wow.
that's not very wide known, I know. So
No, I did not know that. I did not
so
know such
yeah,
a fast response.
yes, yeah, and I think you could say the same about coffee, having an instant response. And it's also triggers histamine release. So And a lot of people don't realize that they have an histamine issue, um, because if you have a histamine issue, it can trigger all sorts of weird symptoms like heart palpitations, which are also like, as you know, linked to anxiety. So you could actually have anxiety issues because you are eating too many foods that are rich in histamine, or they are histamine releasing or raising, I mean, not releasing, or you have like a lack of the enzyme that breaks down histamine in your gut. So if you've got any gut issues, like the balance between the good and the bad guys, that can um, raise histamine levels in the body. And once you reach a certain threshold, then you can get symptoms. And because it just like accumulates and accumulates and accumulates until you reach that threshold, you may not be aware that all the things you're doing, stress you're having, is just building up these histamine levels in your body and then trigger, for example, anxiety.
Mm.
So,
Wow.
yeah, it's very complex.
It is complex. I eat a half a tomato a day. I mean, is it half a tomato likely to have an effect?
It depends on what other things you're eating. You know, half a tomato is not going to have that big an effect. It's the cumulative effect of all the histamine-rich food or histamine-raising foods, or factors that block um, the breakdown of histamine. So I always look at all the histamine factors when I have a suspicion that somebody has a histamine intolerance.
Right, right. So the intolerance would make the situation even worse then.
Well, the intolerance is caused by all these levels of histamine rising in your body. So, and then you reach the level where you're no longer tolerant to histamine.
Right.
Because histamine is a very important molecule in the body. It regulates our sleep and wake cycle. It's important for our stomach acid, and it's also important for our immune system. You know, whenever we have a swelling or something is red or itching, that's when histamine is involved. So we need histamine, but we have to be careful that we don't get excess levels of histamine.
So is it a bad thing for people to take antihistamines?
Yeah, it can also not help with histamine intolerance. Yeah, it's
Right.
always good to look at all the factors that can cause histamine levels in the body to rise.
So if I get something like a horsefly bite, I always get a severe reaction, and I've taken an antihistamine. It's the only time I ever take one,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
it doesn't generally do very much for me if the reaction is that bad. So is it the wrong thing to do to take something like that for that reason?
I think if you take it on the odd occasion, no. But some people take antihistamines regularly because they have allergic reactions to pollen or something like that, and then it would be really much more important to go into the causes of their pollen allergy or something like that, and look at the liver, look at the gut, look if you can improve their tolerance to pollen, for example.
Right. And I think we might have a question. Carolyn said, could you expand a bit more on itchiness, please? I'm not quite sure what it.
No, but every time you have like an itchiness or a red skin or something, that's a sign of that histamine is involved. So the swelling that we get, or the redness that we get, or the inflammation that we get with the wound, it's just a protective measure by the body. It's just, you know, the immune system is always trying to protect us. So, um, so that's quite normal. We have this normal inflammatory response, and histamine is involved in that. But it's everything that's in excess and not in balance. That's a problem.
So it's the not in balance that's the
Yeah,
problem.
but itchiness, for example, I've got, you know, like problems with histamine. So, and I respond. My symptoms are itchiness. I get itchy nose that causes itchy eyes, and I also have itchy toes.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, so that can be a sign of histamine intolerance when you've got any signs of sudden itchiness like that.
Right. Thank you. Carolyn said thank you. And
You're
and
welcome.
you know, with the gut, I was reading that as we age, the gut lining gets thinner.
Can be, but doesn't have to be.
So it doesn't have to be.
Nope. No.
Because the person was saying it happens to everybody as they get older.
No, some people are more prone to it, and that's where Ayurveda comes in. So we've got these three body types, and there's the Vata body type that's most prone to getting a leaky gut barrier because of dryness in the body and less mucus production. And then there's the Pitta types that get like leaking out because of high inflammation. Kapha body types have got less issues because we have excess mucus formation, and the mucus protects us from a leaky gut barrier.
Right. And is leaky gut something really to be afraid of?
Well, it's not a good thing. So it means that, okay, so if you look at the gut is actually not in the body, but it's a tube that goes from the mouth to the anus through the body. And
Yeah.
everything we ingest is first of all in the gut. And then when we digest it and we process it and break everything down into absorbable nutrients, for example, that then crosses the gut barrier, the gut lining, into the bloodstream. And that's the only thing that should cross that barrier. And leaky gut means that this gut barrier is not intact anymore. And then we have something like tight junctions that keep the gut lining intact and tight, as it says. And when you've got like inflammation, because you're eating a lot of irritating food, for example, that can be food like processed food that is difficult to digest with lots of additives, preservatives, whatever. Then the openings between the tight junctions become wider, and that means that it allows bigger molecules to get into the bloodstream, which shouldn't be there. And these bigger molecules can be like undigested protein, for example, or partially digested protein, can be bacterial waste products, because as I said, we've got bacteria, we've got all sorts of microbes in our gut, and they produce waste just like we do, the we and P. It's difficult to imagine, isn't it? But they have waste products that can then get into the bloodstream. So toxins from those. Other toxins can also then get into the bloodstream. Anything that's a larger molecule, and we don't want it there, because as soon as it gets into the bloodstream where it shouldn't be, the immune system gets alerted, and then it responds to these proteins or waste products. And if that happens on a regular basis, the immune system is triggered so often that it starts fighting these molecules. And that's where a lot of food intolerances and sensitivities and also allergies come from, because the immune system is on constant high alert and it can't calm down anymore. So it responds to things it shouldn't see as a foreign invader, but it does see it as a foreign invader and attacks it.
Wow. So Is that what
while leaking.
happens with these nut allergies? Is that what is going on?
With allergies, there's always the liver involved, because as soon as the liver has to filter all the blood, right? So you can imagine that if there's a lot of these substances all of a sudden in the blood, the filter gets overwhelmed. The liver gets overwhelmed, and when the liver doesn't filter out all these undigested proteins or whatever and toxins, for especially toxins, because that's the main one of the many vital functions of the liver. It detoxifies everything that gets into the body, and when the liver gets overwhelmed with all the toxins in the bloodstream, it just they stay in the bloodstream, and then the immune system is again on high alert because these toxins shouldn't be there either, and the toxins get spread throughout the body and lodge in weak areas of the body. So it can be in your joints, and that can cause rheumatoid arthritis. They can lodge in the brain, right? When you've got a leaky gut, you people say, experts say, you also have a leaky brain. So all the toxins get into your brain that can cause all sorts of neurological diseases like Parkinson's, for example. So yeah, leaky gut is something that needs to be addressed, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process.
Mm. So how I'm fascinated to know now, how would somebody, you can't wake up and think, oh, I must have a leaky gut.
Well, when you've got like any sort of liver issues, you can assume that you have leaky gut, especially skin issues, eczema. Rheumatoid arthritis has been linked to leaky gut. There are studies about it, but it gets ignored by rheumatologists, which is
Right.
not very nice for people who suffer from any sort of arthritis. So any sort of autoimmune disease is a sign of a leaky gut. Any sort of food sensitivities or other sensitivities or allergies. Um, so it's always good to address the inflammation and to reduce anything that can cause inflammation in the digestive system that can then irritate the gut lining and cause these tight junctions to become more open.
Right.
So all this starts with our food, and also with stress levels, because that can cause digestive issues if we have any, and we all have high levels of stress at the moment, I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
we
not
do.
talking about myself only, I think, when I say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, just the very fact that we were shut away for so long. Um, in fact, I was talking to some ladies this morning, and they were saying how difficult they found it to get up and go out and do things. And the one was saying she'd even get on the bus and go and wander around the shops and just enjoy herself. And now she goes in the car, goes in the shop she needs to, gets back to the car and gets home.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas before she would just have a leisurely time, now she can be like half an hour and she's home again. And it's,
Wow.
it's she said that how much she's changed, and it's like stressful to be out.
Yeah.
And she was saying how how she'd been affected by being conditioned now to being in.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as we are, um, you know, it's easy to become a hermit. I can see that on myself. I can easily stay at home for 3 days and not go out, but then I
Yeah.
get like cabin fever and I need to go out. But it can trigger anxiety, because you're not used to a lot of people. I can remember when I went into York city centre just before I left. I found it so abnormal how many people there were in the city centre, because I hadn't been used to so many people for months and months and months.
Mm,
And it's abnormal to think that that amount of people is abnormal.
yeah. It
But
is.
that in itself can cause stress, not just anxiety, but stress, because you're not used to being around so many people, even if you're not, anxious of the virus or anything,
Yeah.
just um, because we're not used to it.
Yeah. I suppose it would be very much the same for somebody who, say, has a farm on the hills
Yeah,
and doesn't go into the city very often, to suddenly be in a city environment with all the people and traffic and noise. It would be like an
yeah,
assault on the senses.
it would be overwhelming. Yes,
Mm,
yeah. So stress is all sorts of these, like things that are putting us on high alert, because when we are surrounded by a lot of people, we have to be on higher alert, because there might be, like instinctively, we're looking for cues, where there's, where there might be some danger for us.
yeah. And that could create then going for lunch or something and eating totally the wrong foods.
Yes. Yeah, and also eating when we're highly stressed, which we shouldn't actually, because it doesn't actually um, well, the most important thing is not only the food that we eat. Okay, it should be nourishing, if possible, but more importantly is actually, can we digest the food we eat?
Yeah.
So if you eat something that's not healthy but you can digest it, that's better than eating something healthy, or you think that it's healthy and you can't digest it. Like, for example, when these Vata types eat a lot of raw food or cold food, they can't digest it because they haven't got the oomph, right?
Mm,
They are more prone to have a weaker digestive system. So, and raw food needs to be cooked,
yeah.
right? So they need more energy to process the raw and cold salad. And can you imagine what happens if they are then highly stressed, and they're also prone to more stress levels, higher stress levels, and higher anxiety levels? It's just a yeah, a problem in the making. So they're
Wow.
also then prone to experience more gas and bloating.
Right.
So that's also a sign of high Vata and a Vata imbalance in the body. So anything that's like linked to air, the air element, and gas is, you know, linked to air, and so just by knowing that you have gas and bloating, you can assume that you have a Vata imbalance, and that's usually due to some sort of stress, and it can also be trauma, but in these days, I think it's more linked to stress
Mm.
in most people.
So these um for anybody that doesn't know Ayurveda, can you just say what are the differences?
Yeah, so we have like the Vata types. Their characteristic is that they tend to be um, thin, have problems with putting on weight, and they have long limbs, like long fingers or long toes, or long arms, or tend to be also thin and tall. But it doesn't. They don't necessarily have to be tall. They can also be tiny, like my husband, and slim. So, um, and they are, as I said, prone to experience stress and anxiety more easily, and their whole body is more like imbalanced by anything that's dry, cold, mobile, like traveling, for example. Um, Anything that gets them out of a daily routine, and they also tend to have an irregular routine, so that's not really helping them. So what they need is more warming things, more regular things, and they also tend to be highly creative people. So we all have our weaknesses and
Yeah.
we have our strengths. So they can be highly mobile in the brain, for example, and make them very creative. So artists tend to have Vata in their mind a lot. So that's Vata. And they also have to be careful in autumn, because now when everything is like stormy and there's a lot of wind out there, they really need to make sure they are grounded, because they can easily get scatterbrained and rattled and unsettled in this time of year. So that's Vata. Pitta is more characterized by the fiery type. They have a fast metabolism. They have a lot of fire in their body, a lot of heat, so they can easily overheat. So they have to be careful that they don't expose themselves to too much heat, like the sun in the summer. So for them, the cooling temperatures now are ideal. They can also have a voracious appetite, so they have to be careful with over consuming processed food. So if they eat healthily, they have never any weight problems. But if they eat a lot of processed food because they have this voracious appetite, then they can also put on weight. But normally they have no problems with weight. And they are prone to experience inflammation, inflammatory disorders more easily because of this high heat in the body. And inflammation is also heat. So on the one hand, they have a very good digestive system because they have a very good digestive fire in general. But then they can also, if they overdo it with hot spices, with anything like cayenne pepper, irritants like tomatoes, alcohol is not very good for them, because the seat of Pitta is in the liver, and the liver is a hot, fiery organ as well. Right. So anything that adds heat to that liver is causing problems and imbalances there. So they need anything that's cooling for them. So right. Instead of daily walks in the sunshine, for them, daily evening walks in the moonshine would be really good, right. For example, and being close to water, because right. That's also cooling. And then you've got the Kapha types, who tend to be, so their main characteristic is that they have a lot of excess in the body, like excess water, excess fat, excess mucus, excess everything. So I'm also a Kapha type in my body, although I don't look it. We easily put on weight. We are also more prone to diabetes, to having lung problems because of the excess mucus that lodges in the lungs. We can easily get blood sugar imbalances, weight problems, I've already mentioned. And also because Kapha is made up of water and earth, and you can imagine that's already, if you mix them, quite heavy. Anything that adds to this heaviness is going to make us lethargic and can make us depressed. So we tend right. to be more depressed, but also the other types can get depressed, but for other reasons. So we have a very slow metabolism, but when we're imbalanced, we have the best metabolism. So slow and steady, but not too slow and not too fast. Right. So, yeah, and we're very affectionate, but we can also tend to get attached to things when we are unbalanced and not let go right. of anything. Okay. So water retention would also be a sign of a Kapha imbalance. If you have any sign of water retention, swollen ankles and feet, that would be a Kapha imbalance.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very, very fascinating to see these sort of things in other people.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, that's extraordinary. And yeah, it makes so much sense that we would have these different types of bodies and be influenced and affected by different things, hot and cold and heaviness and the way the body balances. I mean, it's a fascinating thing, the body, and when, you know, the whole way that we're connected up as a whole being, and the gut brain and the heart brain, as well as, you know, the brain, um and different aspects of the brain. um
Yeah, what I should add is that there are people who are purely one type, but they are usually we are a mixture. So I'm basically Kapha Pitta, more Pitta in my mind and more Kapha in my body, but I've also got Pitta signs in my body. So it's very important to really do very good and thorough self-assessment quizzes to find out what your original constitution was when you were born and a child, when you had least imbalances because of your diet and lifestyle and environment, and then see what your current imbalances are and bring them back into balance. Because if you don't know what your original constitution was, it's very difficult to get things back in balance, because you don't know which way to go, whether to add more hot heating stuff or cooling stuff.
yeah. And you know, is it best to find all that out as a child?
Well, if you have a parent that's aware of Ayurveda, yes, that would be really good. Because then you would grow up with, you know, balancing your body constitution all the time, and it would become something natural for you. So you wouldn't have to think about, you know, what balances you or not. Because also as a child, we're much more in tune with what agrees with our body and what doesn't.
Mm.
So when a child, for example, refuses a certain food, then we should not force the child to eat it, because it could be something that doesn't agree with its body constitution.
Right. I saw oh, it was one of these programs on where, and the child wouldn't eat anything other than custard cream biscuits or something.
Hmm. Well, that's not the body constitution. There's something else that went wrong.
Is it?
that's not that's not normal.
No, but for instance, like if a child doesn't want to eat, say, Brussels sprouts.
It could be because it causes gas and bloating in that child in the way it's being cooked, right? Because you can add herbs and spices that would not make it so gassy, for example, for somebody. But I know that a lot of male babies have got very sensitive digestive systems. They tend to have more colics. So, and I also know from some of my friends who had male babies, you know, that some of them really had problems eating vegetables, because it's probably because of the way, you know, like vegetables have a lot of fiber, and that fiber needs to, you need to be able to digest that fiber. So maybe there were some imbalances in the microbiome that made it more difficult for them to digest certain fiber,
Mm.
because not every vegetable has got the same sort of fiber.
Mm.
So it's always important to look and to observe, and if you find any pattern, then just like look more closely and find the reason why something happens, or why you can't why certain food doesn't agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, looking at the anxiety and depression, once you start to change what you eat, how quickly does it have an effect on the anxiety and depression?
Um, that depends on the individual, you know, like, because in anxiety and depression, there's always a lot of different factors involved. It's not just one or the other. But by reducing the stress levels, first of all, and so you improve your digestion, and then through that, the absorption of the nutrients you get from the food you eat, that's one way of dealing with it, but also by improving what you eat. Um, that will eventually have a massive difference, make it a massive difference on your how you feel and on your mood. Um, because 95% of serotonin, for example, is produced by our beneficial gut bacteria. So our gut health is of paramount importance in depression and anxiety. So
Yeah.
we always need to tackle all the factors, have a look, you know, a really, really holistic look at what can contribute. And there's always stress involved, some sort of stress, maybe trauma, maybe suppressed emotions, suppressed grief. Um, and then look at the diet, look at the sleeping patterns, look at, yeah, all sorts of digestive issues. Yeah, it's so important.
So I suppose, you know, if you're in that, I suppose it depends as well on how long you've been depressed
Yes.
and how long you've lived in that place of stress and anxiety would also be something to be considered.
Yes. Because what I've noticed with people who are anxious about um, eating certain food, they're anxious about trying new ways of eating because of the pain they may experience by changing. You know, they very often they've managed to eat to limit their diet to a limited amount of food, but they are comfortable with that. But if you want to make any changes to their limited amount of food, they get anxious about experiencing, you know, their symptoms again. I had a client with fibromyalgia, and she was very anxious about that. So we had to like introduce new food in incremental amounts and really, really take it easy and not introduce like two herbs and spices at the same time, but only one, and also um, within a time frame of 4 days, not every day, but you know, one day and then leave a gap, and then on the fourth or fifth day try it again in this tiny amount and see, you know, whether you have any symptoms. So that's how you can if somebody has anxiety about food, that's how you can slowly increase and the variety
Yeah.
again. Yeah, so it's very individual, you know, how you address things. But as you said, if somebody's had like depression for a few weeks or months, it's much easier to yeah, rectify.
And I suppose it also needs to be um, a willingness to stay with it and give it the time for the body to make the changes.
Yeah, yeah. So all the changes need to be really like small and gradual and not overwhelming. Yeah, and also so that you know what change has got what effect on that person. So if you try too many things at once, that you won't.
Too much.
Yeah, first of all, it could be too much, overwhelming again, increasing anxiety, and then on the other hand, you don't know which of the three changes has produced what effect. Could have been synergistic, yes, but it could also have only been one of the three or two of the three that had a positive effect, and the third one was actually not that important. So,
And presumably, if somebody's on anxiety medication or antidepressants, they would need to talk to their doctor
yes,
and work out when and how to reduce that medication. Because if the body's coming into balance and it doesn't need, you know, that or as much medication, there's bound to be a gradual decreasing of need in that. So to keep taking it would probably cause a different problem then, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah. So if you make any lifestyle or diet changes while on medication, on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, then it needs to be done in cooperation, collaboration with a GP, because even magnesium, has an effect on, um, just to give you an example, on blood pressure. Magnesium naturally lowers blood pressure. If you're on blood pressure medication and you take magnesium, that can lower your blood pressure to a degree that you can just become dizzy, fall, and break your hip, for example, to say
Right.
something drastic. But just to give you an example of, how natural supplementation on nutrients can influence our health anyway. And then if the medication has the same effect, then you just like amplify that effect. And
Yeah.
of course, that's not what we want.
No.
But any change will have to be communicated to the GP, and he needs to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Or she.
Yeah.
Can be she as well.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
That there would have to be a trade.
Yes. But also, if you try to taper off antidepressants without tackling the root causes of your depression, which may be digestive issues, then it's very likely that you're not going to be very successful in either tapering them off or staying off the medication for long. So you have to be aware that, and from what I've learned, depression has always got a gut link. So if you don't address gut health in one way or the other, the depression is very likely to come back. Or it will take a very long time for you to come off the medication.
I just wonder, with the fact that it's known and it's scientifically known that the link is there between the depression and the gut health. There's, I mean, antidepressants are just given out like sweets.
They are.
And nothing is done about gut health.
Well, first of all, they always say they don't have time to read the studies. I mean, the studies have been out for 20 years, I think. 2005, I think, was the first study published on the gut-brain axis, if I remember correctly. So that's quite 17 years ago, 16 years ago. So I don't know, the excuse of not having the time to read studies, how valid is that? And the other one, they are not trained in nutrition, so they're not trained in gut health. Even if they're gastroenterologists, they don't know how to support gut health through food. I've learned from a personal experience with the son of a friend who had severe gut problems once, and the gastroenterologist gave him food to eat that was just like unbelievable. That would have made matters much, much worse for him and not improved his health again. So I don't know. It's also, there's certain companies involved in advising hospitals on hospital food. They're producing certain products, and usually they contain high sugar, to help people recover from a serious illness, and regain their energy levels through sugar intake. That's not the healthiest way to regain your health. It's actually setting you up for further problems down the line. So yeah, there has to be a lot of a paradigm shift, a huge paradigm shift. And also, I mean, I'm always surprised. I'm still surprised that there are people, also bereavement professionals, who really only addressed the mind, as if, like we are cut off here, and the rest is, like the cells or the hormones say, oh, I can't go further because there's a cut-off line, No, they do go further. And the vagus nerve is the link between the gut and the brain, and the hormones are the link, and there's also other chemicals that link the gut to the brain. So we have to consider all these links when we deal with mental health issues and also with grief. And in grief, people are also given antidepressants, and it frustrates me a lot. Because grieving is a natural process, and first of all, you should always look at natural remedies, and not put people on medication and make everything worse for them.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, some people say that it helps them. Yeah, but maybe something else would have helped them as well.
Yeah. That's true. And if you don't try the something else, you'd never know.
Yeah, and it should always be first trying natural remedies. Simple techniques like breathing would do wonders for people. I'm just reading a book by Thich Nhat Khan about what to do when a loved one dies, and he talks about breathing a lot and about walking in nature and connecting with nature, getting the stability from the earth, because you lack the stability because everything's been taken, like the rock has been pulled from under you, so there's no stability. And that's also, that can cause anxiety. I didn't know that I had anxiety when I lost my husband. I was just like, I didn't connect the dots until I read an article about symptoms of anxiety, and one was procrastination. I thought, hang on a minute, that sounds familiar. Yeah, but there were other symptoms as well, not just procrastination. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. There's so much more to be looked at than just the surface, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to show this. This is from an anxiety expert. She's a nutritionist, and she specializes in anxiety, and these are all the factors to consider in anxiety, PTSD, panic. Can you see this?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's and these are factors that are usually not considered. So
yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And yeah, they don't get considered, do they?
no. So yeah, it's important to look at the whole picture and not just the mind.
Yeah. And if people want to look into that, at a deeper level, then can they connect with you and work with you?
Yes.
You taking people through things like that right now and working with them?
Yeah, I mean, anxiety is one of the things that bereaved people, come up with a lot of times. Anxiety, depression, weight gain, insomnia, and they're most of the time they're linked. The factors contributing to that is usually emotional stress and or trauma, and then causing digestive issues and causing nutrient deficiencies, like vitamin D, for example. I haven't mentioned that, but vitamin D is also overlooked in anxiety and depression, and it's so important as a first intervention, really a very easy intervention. But in a lot of people, you will find that they have lack of vitamin D and magnesium, and just by upping the levels, you can make a massive difference to their and how they can address all the other factors like diet and their lifestyle and make other changes. It's so easy to do, but hardly anybody does it. So yeah, so I try to address these when I work with bereaved people. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's something that always comes up, and also fatigue, which is also linked to the other four. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for joining me today and sharing so much of your knowledge.
Well, it's only the tip of the iceberg, but
I know, but you shared so much, and I
well,
appreciate
I
that.
hope it's helping people, to see the bigger picture,
Yeah,
and when they have anxiety or depression, to actually look at their whole medical history. Like starting from birth. Have they been born naturally or by cesarean? That has an impact on your gut microbiome. Have you been bottle fed or breastfed? That makes a difference on the gut microbiome. Have you had one or two or several antibiotic treatments? That makes a difference. And have you had stress, grief, suppressed emotions? What's your diet like? Have you got any digestive issues? Look at these things for yourself and then decide whether you want to tackle those, or try antidepressants first and then find somebody who can support you with diet and lifestyle changes as well.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. And will you drop into the comments after and just
Yeah,
leave some links how people can connect with you,
yeah,
because
I can do that. Yeah.
you do such wonderful work.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm so glad that you could come back and join me again today, and come back again.
Oh, I'm always happy to talk to you about my favorite subject.
Thank you.
Stress and digestive issues
Thank you. So we're going to stop the live stream now and say goodbye to everyone. And thank you, Carolyn, for being with us. And thank you, everybody who watches later.
Yeah,
And
thank you for inviting me again, Jill.
thank you very much, Sabine. And we're going to say goodbye to you all now.
Bye bye.
Bye.